Firstly, thanks for tuning to the video. Before getting into today's topic for discussion, I would like to give a quick introduction about what we at PromptCloud do as a company. If you're a B2C company or any consumer brand for that matter, it's extremely important for you to understand how your products are doing online and what your consumers or users are talking about your product in general across these different e-commerce channels, right? There could be many business questions that you want to get answers for on a regular basis. And one common need for all this is good quality data. I don't think so it'd be an exaggeration when I say that any business that takes decisions backed by data are always few steps ahead of their competition. We at PromptCloud help companies to solve the data problem by automating their entire end-to-end data acquisition pipeline so that they can easily derive insights and make decisions backed by good quality data. Today, we'd like to discuss a topic which I believe is very important for any consumer brand. How can brands leverage DaaS, data as a service, or web scraping to their competitive advantage? I have with me my colleagues Sukesh and Vivek in this spot today to share their thoughts on this topic. By the way, both Vivek and Sukesh are kind of veterans at PromptCloud. They've been in the company for more than 6 years. I've seen the company grow leaps and bounds and almost had a roller coaster ride along with it, I guess. Hi, guys. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. Let's get started with the basics, I guess. First of all, can you please give a brief introduction about you, your background, and maybe your role in the company? Vivek, you want to go first?
Sure. Vivek here. So I joined PromptCloud as one of the first sales people in the company. Then I moved into multiple roles, and currently I'm handling the product side of things, where we have a flavor of e-commerce will coming in the near future. So that's what I am, and I've been around for about 6.5, close to 7 years now.
That's great. It's great. Sukesh?
Hi, I am Sukesh Chande. I currently head the sales team for PromptCloud's custom crawling division. I have been with PromptCloud for almost 6 years now, close to 6 years. It has been a fantastic experience for me, where I started as a sales executive handling outbound sales. And from there, along with Vivek, have seen this company grow from a relatively small 20 people startup to the organization that it is now with diversified products and teams.
Yeah, also completely remote, I guess, now.
Yes.
So let me ask you this fundamental question. Especially in the last 6-7 years, we've seen the growth of e-commerce in a massive way, right? And any company that is consumer focused has to have an online presence, otherwise they're almost living like in a stone age. So I want to ask you this question: why is it important for a B2C brand to have a web data acquisition strategy? Sukesh, you want to go first?
Sure. That's actually an interesting question. To answer that, let me throw in a hypothetical situation here. So let's assume there's no such thing as internet or online shopping. I know it's pretty tough to imagine such a time, but at one point in time, it sure did exist, right? So if you were to say you wanted to buy a t-shirt or a suit or a blazer, anything of that sort, right? You would step out of your home, go to your closest or a favorite shop. You would browse to a few options or have something tailor-made for you before making a purchase. Pretty simple. You might visit one shop, so you might visit a couple of shops before making a purchase decision. So in this scenario, who would you think are the shop's competitors? Obviously, other stores in the nearby area, or at an extreme level, other stores in the same city. May not go beyond the same city, right? So in this scenario, it's not too tough to understand your competition, know who your competition is, and get a feel of what exactly they are doing to attract more walk-ins into their stores, and maybe tackle that with some of your own strategies. Now, to this scenario, let's introduce or push in the era of internet and online shopping. And that's going to bring in a lot of chaos into the mix. Online stores everywhere, they're worldwide. So pretty much have a lot of competition from all the other similar online stores, not just from that city, not just from that state, not just from some cases, not just from that country, but worldwide. So this data about your competition, this data about your customers, this data about what your customers are talking about, all of this is readily available out there, right? Now, the internet is publicly accessible. I can open any browser and get all the information that I need or that I think I need. But it's almost nearly impossible to keep track of these competitors online, which may run into a few thousands worldwide. Even if, let's say, there are not 1,000 websites, but there are many marketplaces out there who might consolidate all this information. And it's going to be a tricky thing to track all these competitors. And this is exactly where your web data acquisition strategy might come into picture. Everyone knows data is the new oil, right? And everyone knows where this data is. But the tricky question, or the biggest question, is how do I get hold of this data? How do I get hold of this data in a format that I can use? And something that is also easy to use, not just something that I can use, but something that's easy to use. So this is where having a plan of action as to how you want to acquire this data, this whole web data acquisition strategy comes into play. Once you have this data, you can make sense out of this data, but how do you access this data? That is why it's absolutely important to think about having a strategy and a plan to get hold of this data, which you can then use to take important decisions, strategic or operational, to see your organization succeed in the way that you planned.
Yeah, got it. And I think
sorry, you had. No, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of things I think Sukesh had mentioned. One, your web data acquisition strategy sits somewhere within your data strategy itself. So I think that is the first place where you should start. And I think there will be natural progression into looking at the web data which is publicly available. But the core of it, or the initial thought that most of our customers tend to have, is how can I make better decisions? So where do we start there? Start in terms of say making better products, or where in the supply chain are we having issues? So once we start putting in pieces related to making better decisions as a core theme for your organization, I think rest of it follows. And other thing which Sukesh mentioned, which seemed interesting, is the competition bit and how global the world has become. And after COVID, I think there's literally no business which is not online. So and the way we define competition has evolved extremely by extreme proportions by this time. So your competition, especially say in modern retail, for example, your vehicle itself is your competitor, as there are private brands that are being introduced by large retailers or online retailers.
yeah.
So looking at specific trends on what those companies are launching, or what are the partnerships they are getting into, those are critical information in terms of understanding where the market is headed towards. So if an Amazon is getting into say fashion category for men, that definitely tells you something, that there is some sort of an uptick that Amazon has seen, and your data would most likely back it. So understanding not just your market, understanding global trends in a way. So some private brand which is started in say India could be the playbook for Amazon or someone else to do the same thing in a different, or a different market like a US or a UK, for example. So that holistic nature of the internet itself is something which all organizations should be aware of. If not going at that scale, we all should be aware and wary of how different things work together as a whole system.
Got it, got it. I think there's one thing which Sukesh mentioned called online chaos. I think we bring some kind of this a sentence called method to madness, right? We bring some kind of method to online chaos in terms of by getting the good quality data and in kind of structured format. So and also another thing unrelated, I want to ask. Suddenly, with this in the internet e-commerce era, once we in the e-commerce age that's been kind of wave that's been very vast in the last it's 5, 6, 7 years time in India at least. There's a big brand which is already been established for many years, and there is a small brand which might be coming in say fashion or some other category. Suddenly, the e-commerce has given the same platter for both the brands, right? So you have the big brand that is competing, that has to compete with the new player in the market. Both are playing at the same playground. So that is a kind of huge advantage for the smaller guys. At the same time, the older guys also keep up their pace to understand what to understand how can they cannot just sit on their laurels and say, I'm the big guy, I can do whatever. And do you concur with that?
Yes and no. I think for startups, it's always not. It's always the case that you are fighting against someone much larger, or you are creating a niche for yourself. So it's not always a level playing field. I would tend to disagree, but yes, e-commerce as a whole has brought a channel for people who otherwise would not have any access to customers for that matter.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's a leveler, but not in terms of, say, leveling the playing field as a whole. It gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of your growth potential and how many customers you can reach out to. Having said that, if you look at, say, the Indian men's grooming industry, so
Yeah.
there are tons of new brands that has come up. I think the whole personal care sector, not just men's category, the whole sector has seen a lot of new players coming in, and a lot of new products being launched, which we did not have like 2-3 years back. Things like, say, beard oil, men's grooming products. I think, at least I personally did not hear about it like 5 years ago.
Yeah, correct.
It was not even available anyway, and we didn't even know there was a need for those things. So creating those categories, some of the brands have done extremely well in terms of positioning themselves in those segments, and some of them are even getting acquired by larger players. So that's why I said it may not be a level playing field, because the bigger players would always have bigger resources. There is a lot they can do, but we are also living in an age where that advantage cannot be taken for granted.
Yes.
It is probably a bigger challenge for those big players to stay relevant in the market rather than the smaller players to create their presence in the market.
Yeah. So I mean that leads me to the next question: staying relevant versus being present in this environment, right? So what do the brands needs to do, in your opinion, to stay relevant in this competitive environment? The B2C brands. Sukesh, you want to?
So, services like Shopify, WooCommerce, or both of these in conjunction with WordPress, so on, have made it easy for someone to set up an online shop. It's not too difficult. You get a domain for, say, $1 or $2 a month, or much cheaper if it's the first year, and then you get shared hosting for about $20-30 for the entire year. And that entire setting up an online shop has become easy. But I think, like Vivek mentioned, it's not exactly a level playing field. I'll take a simple example, a very simple one. Of course, you could see many more complicated scenarios out there, but on Myntra, there is a brand of clothing called Tusok, TUSOK, which sells vacation clothing. Tusok also has an online presence. They have their own website. Now, let's say you're going to Goa or Maldives or Hawaii, anywhere. Right? The first thought that comes to your mind is, let me check Myntra or let me check Amazon Fashion. You would not really directly go to let me check Tusok. Now, in terms of the visibility itself, for Tusok, it doesn't really matter who's selling, where the sale is coming from. But now think about someone who does not have the same online presence or is just building up that online presence. Right? So there are higher chances that someone might visit Myntra, someone might visit Amazon Fashion rather than this particular website, which is where that first present, you're the first company out there in this space, matters a lot. So if you really want to stay ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, be on top of the game, and let's say be one of the top selling companies, it's not just about setting up an online shop. It's the first step, of course, to building a successful business strategy, but not the only thing that is required, right? You need to understand your competition. You need to understand your customers. It's not just a competition that you want to be aware about. You need to be aware of what your customers are thinking, either in the form of reviews that people talk about your particular product. So I bought this shirt, the material is good, but the delivery took 10 days. That's a negative point. So if you understand, go a level deeper and try to understand why it's taking that long. Is there anything that you can do? So understanding your customer by analyzing not just the review content, but also social media content. These days, it's everyone's on Twitter ranting or praising a particular product. Right? There are influencers everywhere.
Start with Twitter.
Start with Twitter.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then understanding your competition. Right? If you're selling Hawaiian shirts or these floral Goa beach type of shirts, who else is selling those shirts? Are there specific categories? What price is selling at? Right? All of these data points that you can think about, along with maybe some other meta information like who else is entering the market? Do I have new competition? Is Amazon itself launching some new line of clothing within their chain of brands or anything of that sort? Will that be a bigger problem for me? Will people trust them more than me? There are many points to think about, but all of this data is present online. It's not something that you really have to dig more really deep into and struggle to get hold of it. It's all there online. But the moment you start accessing this data, the moment you start making sense out of this data is when you start working on and improvising your strategy to reach to the top. And more importantly, to stay there.
It is the scale that is staggering. And to add to your point, one way to look at it is it's not just reviews of your product that matters, right? So if you are in a particular segment, you can look at what people are talking about other brands, your competitors. How are you competing against those brands? And I'm not talking in terms of pricing or your product related features, but in terms of what customers are perceiving them to be. So good example that you gave there in terms of the say delivery speed of delivery itself, which is probably not in your control as a brand if you are partnering with other players in the market. But that is something which you can fix. If there is some issues with say the packaging of your product, people are going to talk about it, and it is easy for you to start analyzing that reviews data rather than any other method that is available out there. See, even if you employ someone to call up all your customers and have a feedback collected, that data also will soon become quite staggering to start making sense out of it. So that is also important. And other way to look at it is there are a lot of brands which started as online only brands and then moved to brick and mortar. So there is your example.
You give some of the examples.
So Lenscard, there is Pepperfry. So they are flooding the market these days.
Yeah,
A ton of them. So, and I am sure all of them would have had strategies in place to understand the voice of the customer through the customer reviews. And that is the most obvious place to start. And it kind of hurts me to know that probably 2% of companies or less than that would actually be doing this and making sense out of it.
oh, oh. I mean, when you say 2% of the company, I'm just broad.
I don't have numbers to back, but
I'm not
I
trying
am
to.
guessing based on our conversations.
Yeah, correct. So that leads me to the another question, right? It's very important. It's very important. Data acquisition is something that we all understand. It's very important. But how does there are two types of companies, right? One company who is very clear that they want to have this kind of data at their disposal, and we have seen a lot of clients come to us saying, very clear mind saying, get me this data, automate this entire streamline process for me, and leave the rest to me. And there are some companies who find this idea kind of exotic and very interesting, and they understand the importance of doing this, but they don't know how to go about it, right? So am I right in categorizing the companies in these broad two categories? And my follow-up question to that is, how should we go about it on the second and first kind of companies when they approach us?
I tend to agree. I would also say that there is a third category which is oblivious of all these things, and this set of companies who we might not see in the next 10 years going forward. But yes, so in terms of the two categories you mentioned, one who knows exactly what they do. The common factor in most of these cases are the ones who know what is to be done usually have a proper strategy in place in terms of what they are looking for, what kind of data they require, and they also have it's not just strategy. Strategy is always coupled with uh, people, process, and technology. So they are the ones who usually have these in place. So if you have the right set of people, the technology, and process, it is easier. And I would typically classify those companies in that bracket where they have figured out what they want and have set up teams and systems in place. The others group may have a requirement and valid requirement, and they are probably in the right paths to discover their strategy as well, or set up their strategy. And in a lot of cases, it may not make sense for a brand to say invest in data analyst for that matter. It's unlikely that a company would say no to setting up. One would tend to imagine that it's unlikely that someone would not want to invest in data scientist or data analyst and such kind of roles and skills in-house. But there are obviously brands who do not want to go that route and probably prefer having another vendor or a partner who can come in and uh, help out in terms of making sense out of the data or even collecting the data. So, and there is everything in between who wants to say outsource the data collection part, but we'll do the analysis or we'll do the data collection. We want someone to build a dashboard. And all those flavors also come into picture. But that second group is mostly people who are in the early stages, and the best thing for them to do is to probably start small in the sense, whichever source of data and kind of data that gives you the maximum returns. So if you are say a personal care brand, I think analyzing Amazon data might be the place to start, because that's where most of the market is already there. So understanding and finalizing what is your minimum uh, viable product or minimum viable solution is probably the place to start. And as a data company, that's what we generally tend to advise our customers in those situations as well. Sukesh, I think you would have better examples for that.
I think Vivek has spoken about some points which we would have come across in most of our conversations. But largely, the way I see this, again, more or less in line with what Vivek said, is the dependence on the stage at which the company, or not necessarily the company, but the team which we are interacting with is in. So if it's someone who's more mature, someone who's more evolved, they would be more specific in terms of the kind of data that they need or the kind of requirements that they have. Someone who's, let's say, slightly early might need more guidance. But the common factor here remains that most of these, again, counting the people who we might not see in the next 5 to 10 years, most of these know that data is the new oil.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of information out there. There is a lot of actionable data right in front of you in the form of all that information that you see on websites. People want to make use of these. Some people know exactly what they want to do. Some people know what they want to do but don't know how to approach that. That's where I think our role as experts in the field of web crawling might come into play, where we get together, try to understand their use case, maybe nudge them in that direction, and give insights that way, so that it can lead to a more insightful discussion around how can they take action on this data, what kind of data is required to take the necessary action to go to the next level.
Correct. So,
This, I hate the saying of data is the new oil. I think oil its prominence one day by day, but data is data, and everyone wants to be there. And if you would allow me, Pavan, I'll do a shameless plug here. So for the second category of customers, that's exactly where we are trying to come up with our own solutions for the e-commerce analysis and analytics platform, which we are working hard on the sidelines. So which you can probably start seeing results in the months to come.
Great. So we're not only talking about data, we're talking about much more than that, which is to solve the real business problems with on top of the data that we can build on it, which anyways, most of our clients are taking advantage of, I guess, with the structured data that we're providing. So, I guess we broadly divided the customer base into three: the ones who know, the ones who don't know, and the oblivion group, I guess. So,
ones who are knowing on start.
So if and DaaS as data as a service is something which we are specialized in, right? Why do these companies need someone like us, PromptCloud? Why can't they do it for themselves?
So now the concept of data acquisition, or to put it in technical terms, web crawling, is not too difficult to grasp. Right? It's a simple act of getting information from the web in a format that you can use. Right? So structured data that you get from the web. Now, all of this information that we're talking about, you can open a Chrome browser, you can open a Firefox browser, or for people who like to use Edge or Internet Explorer, open Internet Explorer.
Brave browser.
Brave people. Right. So, and you get this data visible right in front of your screen. But when you talk about getting data, you're talking about a scale which a human or a bunch of people sitting together cannot achieve with the same level of accuracy that an automated machine or an automated script can achieve. Right? Now, which is the first step, which is where you actually need a program or a script to get you the data in a regular manner frequently, so that you have something that you can make sense out of. So the first step is to move from a manual process to an automated process. Now, moving to the automated process, the initial part of the acquisition might be simple. You know where to point your code to, where to extract the information from. But that is where the simplicity ends for most websites. So websites want to be visible, websites want to be seen. So they generally are open and happy to be accessed by some bots, like your Google bot or Bing bot or Yahoo bots, which improve their visibility across the world. But for a generic automated bot to be able to access this, it might face a lot of obstacles, right? The simplest obstacle that you can face is the CAPTCHA checks that you see.
Yeah.
Right? There could be OTPs in place. There could be access issues. There might be simple blocking issues put in place by the website admin. And there are many other angles to this. But even if all these were not there, to achieve the scale that you would actually make sense out of from the data, which might be valid for your analysis, to achieve that scale on a regular basis requires a level of expertise and experience in this field of web scraping.
Yeah.
You need to think about the kind of servers that you need to maintain. But this is just or the kind of proxies that you need to subscribe to, or any other services. But this is just in terms of the regular resources. We are discounting of it, not even talking about the human resources and the human intellect that is required to upkeep and maintain these servers on a regular basis. So if we factor in all these, it might lead to one of the two problems. It might get very expensive, which means you need to have multiple people looking into these web crawlers and maintain this, and at the same time subscribe to some premium or expensive proxies to be able to get hold of this data. That's one angle to it. The other angle is you might run into the problems where the data that you're extracting is not up to the mark, which means the analysis that you're trying to perform is not based on some valid data, or is based on some incorrect data. So to avoid all these problems, companies like PromptCloud exist, wherein we have built up the experience and expertise in this field of web scraping, web crawling, automated data acquisition over time. We have been around for over 10 years now. We've been around since about 2009, 2010, and have been in this field. So we've built up an expertise and experience in this area, which is why it makes sense that someone who wants to look at large-scale data acquisition, they outsource it to companies like PromptCloud and make use of services like this, so that the data acquisition continues to be a hassle-free process, and they can continue to make use of this data and put in efforts where it matters the most.
Yeah, correct. Do you want to add?
Is dangerous, and no data is kind of taking you nowhere. Another point I think we should touch upon is that websites keep so the scale of things, as I was mentioning earlier. So this is a problem which exponentially increases by complexity within no time. So you might think that you can start an MVP with one data analyst, one data scientist, and he's able to get all the required data in one go. Nothing is stopping people from doing it, and that is probably the right way to approach that as well. But the moment you start adding new data sources and start going breadthwise within a same data source and expand your scope, the scope is not incrementally getting added, it is exponential growth. So it changes the whole equation. And we have a lot of clients who have started on their own, and at one point it just doesn't make any sense to add more resources to that particular effort, whether it's in terms of people or infrastructure cost. It is all possible. There is nothing stopping. In IT, there is hardly anything which is not possible. It's a question of whether you want to actually do it. Is that what your business is supposed to do. So that is the question that usually it boils down to. And the scope and the kind of variabilities that the web has to offer is what adds to the complexity.
Correct, correct. Makes sense. I mean, it's almost like and if somebody has to do it in-house, they have to have a separate team doing that, dedicated team doing that, and it's a lot of
And
resources.
I don't think any company we have spoken to has a team
Exactly.
dedicated for say data collection. That is another problem.
Yeah, correct, correct. Makes sense. Apart from this, I mean, if I talk, and since we're talking from a consumer brand or a B2C brand perspective, what are the common use cases or problems that the brands face in navigating through the e-commerce ocean, if I may call it that way? And what is our role as a company in to help clients achieve the online growth?
This question, I think we can talk about this for hours together. So I'll try to focus on maybe one or two aspects of this. But to answer the first question, there are multiple angles to this. Right? They can be possibly 50, 60 different angles we can think about it. And some parts of this may largely depend on how branched out or narrow a company's structure is. But typically, if you look at it, you would imagine that there are different divisions within an organization for, let's say, revenue management. There'll be a different division that looks into the voice of customer, and they could possibly be different division that looks into the category management. Now, for each of these divisions, they might find different aspects of data acquisition appealing. For instance, if you take a look at the revenue management people, they might be interested in understanding what my competitors pricing similar products at. They might be interested in understanding what my products are priced at on different platforms.
Yeah.
The revenue management people might also be interested in ensuring that the products that they actually have in stock are shown in stock online, right? Understanding that these products are in line with their actual inventory. If not, then maybe take that issue up with the online marketplace or anything of that sort. Similarly, if you think about the voice of customers, the data acquisition part can feed into their sentiment analysis engines, right? They can take reviews data from various online portals. They can take tweets from Twitter based on certain hashtags and understand what people are talking about. It's a positive sentiment, whether it's a negative sentiment. Are people talking about delivery aspects? Are people talking about specific features of the product? Are people talking about the online availability of the product? So there, like I said, there are different angles that people want to talk about, but in the end, each team by itself may be interested in different aspects of getting data from the web, but it will boil down to, if you have to largely classify into different segments, it would either boil down to competitor analysis or brand monitoring or voice of customer analysis. Or even if we were to go slightly deeper and slightly specific, like you have search engine optimization for your website and the visibility across the web, organizations might be interested to understand what are the first set of products being displayed when you search for specific keywords, understand your brand's penetration, brand's visibility when you search for keywords. So web crawling opens up a lot of use overall time that you spend in analyzing the data.
Yeah.
But like I said, again, multiple angles for you to think about and work on. Vivek, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered most of it.
Since, yeah, sorry, wait, go ahead. I'll just throw a follow-up question on that, I guess.
No, I think you can go ahead. I think Sukesh has covered.
Since we understand, since we work completely on the custom crawling side, there are different businesses that comes with different kinds of use cases and the problems that that they have in real business environment, right? though we can generalize these use cases like Sukesh mentioned into maybe 5 or 6 different scenarios, I want you to give us some examples on the impact that we made in some of our clients' businesses. What was the problem before, and they came to us, and what is the impact that we managed to achieve? We managed to help our clients with our data strategies or crawling solutions.
I think in the consumer product goods category, uh, we have had clients who were looking for price parity, maintaining price parity and understanding who the unauthorized sellers are, or within the set of sellers, are there people who are undercutting below brand standards. So monitoring, keeping a tab on your pricing parity is one thing which is a very common requirement that comes out. To give specific example of making sense out of reviews, there is one of our clients, I think I wouldn't take name, but one of their products had this issue of leakage. Their package had a leakage issue, and it was through the reviews analysis that they found out that that was a problem with their product, and they started introducing that squeezy bottle for their sauce or something like that. And that really had an impact in terms of their sales numbers as well. So those are the kind of use cases that typically come our way. But from the PromptCloud side of things, it's the data that we give in terms of the quality of data and the timeliness of data, etc. So as I said earlier, wrong data is dangerous thing to work with. So that might take you down rabbit holes where you should never have been.
Yeah.
And no data is not taking you anywhere. So getting the right data at the right time is where I think we take a lot of pride in
Yeah.
what we.
Yeah. Sukesh, you want to add on to anything?
Right, right. I think that's very well said. If I were to take the liberty of talking about a different use case that we work with, I think to shed more light, we have one large MNC who primarily deals with FMCG products with us, whose primary goal was to ensure that uh, the products that they sell online are, one, being sold by the authorized sellers, right, on various sites which they have a tie-up with, and two is to ensure that these products are actually available and ready to buy if their stock is available in the warehouses. And our client ended up using the data that we crawl and deliver to them to build up automations that can take up issues or raise support tickets with the online retailers to ensure that the stock availability is in line with their warehouse numbers. Also, to be able to automatically track sellers who were not authorized to sell their products. They've built up automations using this data and made that entire process of tracking and tagging and raising support tickets and resolving those a much more seamless and a much more simple process. Although it might have taken, let's say, a week or two to set up this process and might have involved some effort. But after these first 2 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks, this entire process has become extremely smooth, extremely simple and seamless, and has resulted in a much more better visible and available to purchase products online.
Great. I think those are some of
Just
the.
one more use case. This is
Yes.
something which, a lot of my friends and family get surprised when I say this. There are a lot of customers that we work with who want us to collect data from their own websites, and it's mind blowing that That is the situation that is the scenario that we live in.
Because it's their website, right? They can do it on their own, right?
Have a structured way to look at their own data. They have it on their website. Probably someone from the web development team has access to that data. Someone from marketing has images. Someone from revenue management has pricing data. But there is no one common view of what they have on their own website. And I think we have definitely more than a few customers for whom we collect data from their own website and give it back to them. That is another.
That's I think that's a kind of interesting, funny insight to end the pod, I guess. Thank you both for your time. I want to end this pod with one quote from one of a person that I kind of look up to these days, called Naval Ravikant. So he says, we live in an age of infinite leverage, and the economic rewards for genuine intellectual curiosity have never been higher. I think we can rephrase that safely, saying that all the B2C brands and everyone, all of us, I guess, live in an age of infinite leverage, that is the internet and e-commerce. And the economic rewards has never been higher for someone who knows how to navigate the data and get the best out of the data that's available on the internet. So with that being said, I want to end the podcast, and thanks Sukesh, Vivek, and thanks everyone for patiently listening to us. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.